Episode 5, part 2, and we're at least going to start this off talking about the destruction or dismantling, that's the word, of the Department.
Started with a D.
Department of Education. And I guess I came up with 2 points right now in my head. The first is ways in which it could affect me directly. My son is diagnosed as dyslexic, so he gets some of that additional schooling, special instruction, whatever, and that's the kind of thing that is overseen and funded to a certain extent by the department. So that's one way, among others, where it could affect me directly. The other point that I wanted to raise, and then I'll throw it back to Steve, is just the number of people, and unfortunately I'm seeing them on the left as well as the right, but the number of people who do not understand how education works and are therefore very, very, very easily duped by Trump's primary talking point. His primary talking point, of course, is, hey, we need to send education back to the states. The problem with that talking point is that the majority of it, in terms of curriculum and that kind of thing, always was with the states. So that's not a logical reason to get rid of this organization because you don't understand how things are working.
Yeah, that was where I was going to go, and you kind of hit it right on the head. The fundamental misunderstanding of what the department was set up for and what was put in place for. And there's going to be certain schools in certain areas, because it's funded locally by tax dollars and it's regulated as far as curriculums by the state, right? So certain areas and certain, first of all, didn't have the correct amount of money to even start educating properly. Secondly, when it comes to special needs students or special requirements for certain disabilities and things like that, there was no funding for that. So the federal government stepped in and said, look, we're going to go for some of these schools that don't have the tax dollars. We're going to give them some money to have some, we're close maybe to equal to what some of these other schools are
try
doing.
And even it out a bit.
Right.
Yeah.
And then we're going to give you some money for some of these programs like feeding a kid, because you can't learn if you haven't eaten, you know. And these are systemic problems, you know, that exist outside of the whole school system, granted. But this is one way that within the school system, we can address some of these systemic issues, right? So that was what it was set up for. It has nothing to do with the curriculum. So as you mentioned, Trump brings it up as the reason the test scores are so low is because of this federal school, I keep forgetting the name of it. The
curriculum, yeah.
No, not the curriculum. What he dismantled.
The DEA. Department of Education.
Why is that so hard to remember? Whatever.
Yeah.
Yeah.
DOE.
That's the DOE. Department of Education. He DOA'd the DOE, and So there's this complete fundamental misunderstanding, right? So the curriculum is not set by the DOE. The amount of money that goes to each individual school is not set by the DOE. None of these things that he's addressing as the issue, that America spends per capita per student more, which I want to look at that. That's one thing he was trying to say too. I don't know.
That might be true, but once again, it's done on the state level, and so it would be really skewed by some states versus others, and
some districts. Like
that too.
When I lived out in the suburbs, there would be one district that probably had, I wouldn't even kid you, probably 5 times as much per student than some in the inner city. When you're out in Barrington Hills or something. Like, they had swimming pools and tennis courts, and come on, man. They're probably spending literally double, triple, quadruple what.
And then you got others that can barely afford pencils, and I'm not kidding. I mean,
yes, and the teacher is giving, so the whole system is unfair to begin with. This was trying to give a chance to some kids with special needs, and some schools that are going to suffer because they don't have the tax dollars, a fighting chance to kind of try to give some balance to this insanity and once again, it's the systemic nature of poverty in general especially for minorities, makes it impossible for them to ever get out, without some kind of, intervention somehow. It's just not going to happen. It's just not. And people that have the resources should be, and they don't, because they get stuck in this freaking thing where, I should leave it up to the church, leave it up to all these charities, leave it up to non-profit. No, the federal government, look, in every single situation throughout the history of the United States of America, any progressive movement had to be fought with force. It didn't happen otherwise. We had to have a civil war. We had to go to battle with, in the late 1800s, early 1900s with the Pullman strikes, and it turned into some bloody battles. And then with FDR, they literally wanted to have a coup and kick him out, There's a whole conversation we can have about that. And maybe we'll do that next, about that comment about France wanting the Statue of Liberty back.
Oh.
She tried to make it. We'll do that one next.
Okay, sure.
So we'll get a little history lesson there. But this whole notion that somehow the Department of Education is to blame for the poor test scores is preposterous, because that's not what they do. They don't set curriculums. And as far as I'm concerned, like, when you're measuring this stuff, it's just how well can they perform to a test, and even that alone is disturbing. But why are they scoring so low on something that's it's just fundamental about it, the education system in general. So and then blame teachers when you don't pay them, and the students are just, unfortunately, because they come from these environments that are so abusive and destructive that they can't sit. A lot of them are having a hard time sitting still, and just focusing on they don't have any food.
Well, that's exactly what I was going to bring up. In case you were wondering how big a problem that was, keep in mind that there was a push to make some of those meals available during vacations and during holidays and things, because if you didn't, some of those same kids would go hungry.
Right. So now what's going to happen? Is that going to raise the test scores? Is this going to raise the test scores, people? Answer me that question. How? And anybody who's for this, and this whole notion that somehow, and this is one of the other, misrepresentation, it all goes back to the states, is that these people are being indoctrinated, these kids are being indoctrinated in schools, and they're just, it's not what's happening. They're getting taught the basic raw essentials to become a cog in the systems of capitalism. They're not being taught critical.
But devil's advocate, if they were, the blame would be on the states who control the curriculum. It wouldn't be on the federal government.
But they did. They blamed the federal
government. I know. I'm just saying.
Because people don't know that's not who sets it. So here we go once again with the ill-informed populace getting behind something they know nothing about. And how do you argue with somebody who has no information and
not only no information, but they refuse to hear correct information. They immediately reject it as being some form of
fake news.
Fake news, yeah.
Because they've been so inundated with fake news, and then when they start seeing things that are fake, they're just like, well, it's all fake. It's all fake. So I'm just going to go with my gut.
Of course, their gut is more confused than
anything. Yeah. Because their gut is racist, bigoted, misogynistic, and all these other things that are systemic. Then they go, no, I'm not. And then do exactly racist things. You can say it all you want. It's what you do. And then, like I said, just because you're not taking them out to the woodshed anymore and hanging them from trees doesn't mean that you're not a racist in some way, shape, or form. You're just like, microaggressions here and there and things like that. And and can the Waters get a little money there from time to time? Admittedly, it can.
Well, because as you said, to some extent, even if I don't go to so far as to say I'm a racist, which I could, I benefit from racism.
Yes.
And I don't deny that for a second. Now, do I stumble over? Oh, am I a racist? Yes, but I definitely benefit from racism. There's no doubt about that.
And I'll go as far as to say that, yes, there are probably things I come across where there is a racist idea that comes in my head. if I see somebody looking a certain way, dressing a certain way, and behaving a certain way, I'm probably going to cross the street, or that thought's going to cross my mind first before I go, wait a minute, what am I thinking? See what I'm saying? My subconscious still has it, you know.
And it gets really messed up because, like, what we do sometimes is if we see somebody that's doing something that looks a little fishy and they are a minority, then we deliberately do not call the cops, where we might be tempted because we're like, oh, it gets really murky.
Like I told you, this is where things get weird. It's like, so that's why you have to understand how the brain works to recognize you're biased, or know when to have a legitimate fear.
Yeah.
So yeah, so you know, of course, if you're basing everything off fear, that's not, you know, categorized in a rational sense, just because it's fear mongering, then you know, then that's one thing. So yeah, it's recognizing these things. But to say that, oh no, I don't have a racist bone in my body is laughable. That's just like, oh, I don't have a bias. I just look at everything objectively. No human being, no entity.
Exactly.
No, you are a human being. That is what you do. It's recognizing those things.
Right.
And
you either recognize that that's the way things work, and you are
the brain works.
And you're still a victim of it.
Because you have a brain.
Hopefully by recognizing that, you can tear apart some of it. Not all of it, because once again, not perfect, but some of it. Or you deny that completely, in which case you can't make any change.
Right. I don't want to make this into a discussion of neuroscience, but then you start using your executive brain to put a bunch of different stuff together to come up with a decision. You know?
Yeah.
But, you know, come on, man. How do you explain that to somebody like who's like in complete denial, though? Because like I said before, what it ends up doing is when they have to deconstruct themselves, right? And then they start recognizing the darkness within, and then that extrapolates to the darkness without. It's very it causes a great deal of distress for most people, and they'd rather just push that aside or project it out than internalize it and say, holy shit, and look at the darkness within. And it's only through the darkness that you can get to the light, you know. So many people have said it in so many ways. Nietzsche said it, Jung said it, everybody said it.
Some of it is what you just said is it's this whole worldview, and people on the whole, if you tell them, hey, you need to exercise a little bit more, or you need to eat less of this or whatever, if you give them one single area to focus on, they can be really good at that.
Right.
But a lot of what we're talking about, it's not like, oh, it's this one little change. It's, oh, wait a minute, my entire worldview is shattered because you're making me look at, you know, X, Y, and Z.
Yeah. It's
like
too much to swallow. And, you know, if you saw the previous discussion, I was talking about how, you know, my thoughts and ideas have transitioned over time, and that what I need to do is have a little more grace and empathy with some of these people, because, you know, I guarantee you at one point in time in my life, I either believed what they were saying for a short period of time or for a brief minute, thought about it, and then just dismissed it offhand as being a ridiculous idea, you know. Yeah. So, you know, I can't, you know, it's not, you know, you don't have to believe everything you think, you know. So, and coming to that realization is very helpful too in life. Like, you know, oh wow, that's a bad idea. Like, why am I thinking that? That's not right, you know. So yeah, and then just allowing them the time to kind of come to terms. But, you know, I guess it depends on so many different factors and whether or not you're going to take that into consideration. But it's almost like we've reached a point where it's like we don't have much time to give these people time to transition out of it. Maybe if we can get out of this situation that we're in right now, we can go back and try to like get some of these people back into the stream of things, out of this cult and the cultish mindset, and out of this, you know, bigoted racist system that we're living in. But yeah, what do you do right now? Like right in the moment when it's like do or die, you know, almost for a lot of people. It's a good question, man. I don't know. Like, can you allow them grace at this point? Like, hey, just give them a little grace, they'll come around. Well,
I don't know. Good question. I mean, your comment about time, though. I mean, it's like it used to be that people would say, "Oh, well, in 2 years for the midterms, if we can just make it till then, or in 4 years, we can just make it till then." And I'm already at the point of saying, when we have elections again, but not putting a timestamp on it, because if something doesn't change, it won't be when it normally is supposed to be. There won't be elections in
Yeah.
2 years there won't be an election. And I don't. And I was telling my wife, I don't mean that it will be a fake or rigged or anything like that. I mean there won't even be a fake election. There won't be the pretense of an election if something doesn't reverse course. And we may end up doing a thing where we hit 4 years from now and we don't have that election, and then we clean things up in 8 years, or I don't know when. Whenever we get things fixed.
I don't foresee that. I think if they did do something like that, we'd say, well, we're postponing the election. I don't think they would just say we're done with elections. They would say we're postponing.
Well, I think
But
it'd be
I
more
think-
subtle. They just wouldn't acknowledge that there was even supposed to be an election.
They could, but
Yeah,
I don't see
know.
that happening. But what I do, because that's almost moving too fast, or maybe it's the discombobulating factor. But anyways, the thing that I would see them doing is doing like something like Russia. It's just like, oh yeah, we'll have an election, and then the whole thing's just a joke.
Yeah.
And there is no election. Just kind of like this last one kind of feels like.
Well, but worse. I don't know how else. I could try and go into detail, but the simplest analogy is yes, like that, but worse.
Yeah. So, yeah, Department of Education.
I think we pretty much
I think we
almost talked that to death. I mean, there are probably angles we could come at, but that we mostly got that in a nutshell, I think.
Right. So, okay. So we're probably going to move on to the next one. I want to briefly touch on the new press secretary. Have we?
No,
we
no. How long has the newest one been in?
Since Trump.
Oh, that one. Yeah. Okay. I thought maybe she'd been replaced by already. That's why I was asking.
No.
Okay.
Not that I know of.
Okay. Well, sure, we can talk about it.
Okay.